In this video, you're going to learn another ES6 feature which will help you write code in a more effective way with fewer lines of code compared to ES5. This feature is called destructuring. Now, what is destructuring? Destructuring is a JavaScript expression that allows us to extract data from arrays, objects, and so on. So it can work with arrays and many other types of data. So we're going to start with arrays at the moment. So let's start with a simple example. So going back to ES5, let's define a couple of variables x and y. Now, in ES6, using destructuring, you can actually define these two variables in a better way. So you're going to define a const, and that's going to be an array format. And inside the array, we're going to have our variables x and y, or a and b. And then we're going to assign an array value to our array made of a and b. Now, if you log a or b, you will get 3 and 4. So this is a simple example of destructuring used with arrays. Now, this will help you in scenarios like when you want to return or process return values in array formats. So for example, we can define a function process string. So this function is going to take a string and will return an array made of the value of the string and the length of the string. Okay, so this function is returning an array. Now, if you want to store the results or the results in a couple of variables, one variable storing the value and the other one storing the length, you can use destructuring for that. So for example, if you log process string of hello, you're going to get an array hello and 5. Now, if you want to store hello inside a variable value and 5 inside another variable length, the ES5 way would be a little bit laborious because you're going to store the result inside a variable result, and then we're going to store the value inside like this, and then you're going to store the length inside the variable length like that. All right. Now in ES6, it's going to be a lot easier. What you can do, you can just define these two variables inside an array format like this, and then you assign the value or the results to this array. All right. Now, if you log value or length, you get the correct values. So this is another example showing how destructuring can make your coding a lot more effective and easier. All right, now let's check another example where you can use destructuring to make your code a lot easier. So imagine that you've got a couple of variables, C and D, and you want to swap the values of C and D. So in ES5, you had to write a few lines of code to do that. So first, you had to define an intermediate element, let's call it E, where you store C, or the values of C, and then you change the value of C to D, and then you set the value of D to E. Now if you log C and D, you get 2 and 1. And this is in ES5. Now in ES6, you can use the structuring for that. So basically, what you can do is you set the array C and D to the values D and C like that. And if you console.log C and D, you will get 2 and 1. All right. Now you can also, instead of writing var C equal 1 and var D equal 1, you can also use the structuring for that. You can use let C D equal 1 and 2 at the beginning. Okay. Now there is another feature that you can use with arrays destructuring, and that's default values. So let's set the values of two variables, city and country, using arrays destructuring. So to do that, we're going to use an array format like this, city and country. And then we're going to set that to something like New York and USA. Now, what you can do, you can store this inside a variable. Let's call it list. And if you log your variables city and country, you get the right results as you would expect. Now, what if inside a list we don't have the country? We only have the first value showing the city. Now, if you save, the country now is going to be undefined. Now, to solve this, you can set a default value to the country. And let's say that the default value is going to be USA. So now if you save, you get two values, one for the city and one for the country. So now this shows that if you don't provide the second item there inside the array list, then we're going to use the default value. But if you specify it, so for example, let's say that our list now is London and England, then you're going to get two values there, one for the city and one for the country. So the default value is only going to be used if you don't provide the corresponding elements inside the array showing values. And this is a very important feature in ES6, because if you go back to ES5, you're going to need to write a more laborious code. So let's try that. First, you will need to define the city and set it to the first element of the array. And then you're going to define the country, and you're going to set it to one value or the other depending on a condition. Basically, you're going to be checking if the second item is available in the array, and then you're going to decide whether you set country to USA, the default value, or it says country to the elements if it's available. So you're going to be checking if the second item is undefined. Right. So if that's the case, you use the default value. Otherwise, you use the second element inside the array. So let's make sure that this is working. So in this case, we've got London and England. Now, if we try without the second item, we use the default value. All right. All right, so now let's comment the ES5 code. So in the next video, you're going to learn destructuring with objects.